Welcome to the Hive Summit, everyone. So glad to have you here today. It is going to be another awesome day of learning in the Hive. Some updates before we get started. First, make sure you share out the sweet ideas you're gaining here in the Hive using our hashtag Hive Summit and Hive Sketch. Second, make sure to invite others to come to the summit. Have them go to hivesummit.org and sign up. They'll get access to this video and all the other ones to come. Third, if you could find a bit of change, maybe not grab that latte this week and consider putting some money towards helping the summit create change outside the Hive through the Kiva Fund. This fund helps people around the world change their communities. The Hive Summit Kiva Fund helps so many people, from access to fresh water and education to helping people cultivate new sustainable fields throughout the world, and much, much more. It would be an honor if you could help grow this fund by jumping on over to the Hive Kiva Fund and help us change the world. Thank you for your support. Together, truly, anything is possible. Last update, I promise, is food brings people together, just like the Hive. So remember to jump on over to my YouTube channel and find the Busy Bee recipes that are getting released one per day for each speaker. I would love to share a meal with all of you guys. Okay, on to today's speaker. Today's speaker is an educational production powerhouse, from their book titled Shake Up Learning with over 200 5-star reviews to their master classes that are offered on their website and everything in between. They are aimed at improving our learning landscapes, smoothing out the path that is before us as they challenge us to learn more and more. Spend 5 minutes following them on social media or just a quick peek at their site. You will be hit with endless learning opportunities for growth. This bell just keeps on ringing. They offer Google Tips, Flipgrid favorites, and practical playbooks for just about anything in the educational space. Throughout it all, today's speaker shares it with a smile on their face and a sincere heart, aimed at only at making our learning spaces healthy and functional for all stakeholders. It is my honor to welcome Kasey Bell to the Hive Summit. Welcome, Kasey.
Hey, thanks for having me. I am honored to be here. And can I just say, I want to take you on the road with me. Can I get this introduction everywhere that I go? That was fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
No problem. Putting it together, it was just unbelievable. All the things that you share and help us out. You know, I mean, from blog posts to podcasts. I didn't even mention that in the intro. Like she's host of 2 podcasts as well. So thank you for all you do and bring to make our learning landscape just better and better.
My pleasure. It's my passion. I love what I do.
That is apparent to all of us. So for starters, I thought we could kind of take that book, Shake Up Learning. I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do here at the Hive Summit, is just shake up what we've done before, try some new things, get out of our sort of comfort zone. Could you sort of I don't want to say quickly, but could you just sort of sum up what's the core piece to the Shake Up Learning? I'm sure there's a gazillion practical tips in there, but what's the core philosophy?
So essentially, the book is my blood, sweat, and tears and everything I've learned over the last 15 years in education, but trying to put it at a practical level where teachers can actually implement these ideas in their classroom, no matter where they are, whether they're sort of a tech newbie or really tech savvy. I wanted this to be practical. So there's sort of 3 parts to the book. There's the why Shake Up Learning, sort of that part that a lot of people like you and I get, but that a lot of teachers and administrators, I feel like, still are kind of on the fence, don't really understand where we're going and why we're pushing for all of these things. The middle part, the heart of the book, is all about dynamic learning and the dynamic learning framework that I developed to put all of these ideas together for teachers. And then the last part is that planning piece. It's how to actually implement this in your classroom, down to templates and tips and everything else. So how to actually make it happen in your classroom and not just talk about these lofty ideas and research and things, but actually do some actionable things in your classroom.
We all love actionable steps. That's fantastic. But I got to say, too, for the layout of the book, I like all those sections. And I know sometimes for us that are early adopters, the ones that are kind of out there already doing the things, that why section, sometimes it's but I actually really contend reading through those why sections are really important because, one, it it gives us your perspective, like your frame of reference. And I think it sometimes arms us with more reasons to do these things when we will get caught off guard by maybe an admin, maybe a fellow teammate, maybe a student, maybe a parent who kind of says like, why are we doing this thing? Why are we trying this thing? And in our infancy of that new idea, we sometimes aren't armed with enough. Like we kind of get it. We're like, no, this is important, but like that might not be what I want to just say to a principal. Like this is important. Like being armed with like your whole story or my whole story or whatever, that why I think is a really important piece, even if we get it. So,
Yes.
thank you for including that. Um, and even though we're not going to spend a ton of time on the why here, check out the book, people, because it's fabulous. You can pick it up, most retailers and definitely Amazon. So you had mentioned kind of in that second piece, this framework, this dynamic learning framework. And that is what I would love to sort of dive into. And then you sort of said the third part was the practical. We'll probably sprinkle some of these practical ideas throughout the framework talk today. But like, let's hear about this framework. What is that all about for shaking up learning? Because I want to shake it up.
Well, I will tell you that the descriptive words that came to me when I was trying to figure out how to describe the type of learning that I wanted to see in the classroom, the word dynamic just sort of naturally came to me. And I think part of it comes from being a language arts teacher and teaching static versus dynamic characters. That's a compare and contrast that we use a lot in a lot of different places. And it really just sort of stood out to me. Okay, I kind of see static as like the old school way, traditional way of teaching and learning, mostly the way that I learned in school. And then the new ideas, the new things that we're trying to shake up and do things differently and make it more dynamic. And so I developed these definitions in this framework based on this idea. And really, what it comes down to is just thinking about what we're doing in the classroom. And so, static teaching is very much characteristic of the way that I began teaching when I first started. I don't know about you, but I look back on my first few years of teaching and I think, oh my gosh, what did I do to these poor kids? I think about the one and done type of activities that we did. It was very static. Do this worksheet, fill out this packet, read this article, answer this worksheet. And I didn't do a great job of connecting the dots. Of course, we didn't have a lot of technology back then, but I don't want anyone to think that the word dynamic means tech either, that we can engage students in new ways and we have new things that are opening up to us to do things differently, sometimes because of the way the world is evolving and not necessarily just because it's using technology. So as you know, we can gamify something without technology and we can
100%.
unplug and do some other things that are very engaging and dynamic. So dynamic learning is sort of the contrast between that. And of course, I really like to emphasize static teaching versus dynamic learning, really making that shift from teacher-centered to student-centered. And dynamic learning, it's characterized by that constant change and process. It's growing, it's evolving, it's connecting, it's moving beyond those traditional boundaries that we typically think of in a campus, in a classroom, at a school, and helping us move beyond using digital substitutes in our classroom and even beyond the traditional notion of hard and fast due dates and emphasizing a lot of those 4 C's. For me, the 4 C's were really foundational as part of the dynamic learning framework.
That I mean, 100% is where I think we all need to go with learning. And I kind of love that you kind of openly sort of admitted that you didn't like this isn't how you came out of college ready to teach, like, right? There was growth yourself, and like I think we all need to be reminded of that. That you're seeing everyone at a point where they have practiced to that point, and you know they didn't start that way. So like it's about getting started. It's about trying to do these things or the other ideas we get here in the Hive. Is you got to begin somewhere. And Kasey, your story, like you've gotten to a point where, like I said, you're an educational production, like full on company almost from all the things you put out, and yet like you started the same way all of us did, like desks in rows or whatever, and handing out worksheets and doing those one and done activities. But you grew from there.
Yeah, I taught the way I was taught. I actually have a presentation called Confessions of a Bad Teacher, and pretty much all of the lessons that I feel like I learned the hard way that I don't want anybody else to have to go through everything that I went through in order to catch these things before they get too far gone in our classrooms.
So let's turn and sort of dive deep into these sort of this framework that you have. So if we were to look at that kind of like the first one here is like the Beyond the Bell here. Uh, talk to us a little bit about that.
So at the heart of the framework is just student-centered learning, those 4 C's, and then what I call the beyonds. And so we have beyond the bell, beyond the grade level and subject area, beyond the walls, beyond the tools, and beyond the due date. And when I say beyond the bell, I almost wish I had named this something else, but I'll tell you what it meant to me is that just because the bell rings doesn't mean that learning has to end. And that's really what I wanted us to think about, going beyond just what the kids sort of associate with, oh, the bell has rung, the workday is over, it's Fred Flintstone time, I'm sliding down the tail of the dinosaur and I'm going to be done. That's how my 8th graders were. Like as soon as they walked out the door, it was sort of, that hooray, there's no more work, there's no more learning to be done. But I want students to recognize learning even outside of the 4 walls of the classroom. And I feel like this is part of that growth mindset that we talk so much about with students. But I want students to have a lifelong learning mindset. I want them to recognize that when they're on the bus on the way home and they're on YouTube looking for that Minecraft trick, that's learning. I want them to connect those dots and to recognize what learning looks like, and that it's not just about a grade, that it's about improving ourselves, because I feel like teaching ourselves new skills and being able to find answers is the number one skill that we can give our students these days, because things change too fast. We want them to be lifelong learners. Otherwise, if we're just memorizing the content, then they're going to get left so far behind. So I want us to build this mindset so that we can help them become those independent thinkers and find the answers to their own problems.
What I loved about your answer there is the example you gave, because I think another trap that we fall into as educators is this notion that like learning takes place at school. And now like the other assumption we might make then is if we're talking about beyond the bell, some of us may think, what can I give my student so that learning continues? And your example was they looked on YouTube to how to Minecraft something, right? And that was them learning themselves, like, right? And it doesn't have to be an extension of what we do. I think we need to encourage students to like, use all the tools they can, use all the resources that's at their disposal. But at the same time, I think as educators, we have to embrace the fact that like they have their own learning goals and initiatives. If we can give them the tools about how to learn, but not always try to define what the learning is at all times of their life. Like school is our time to like to sometimes decide, what the curriculum and the scope and sequence. But out of school, I love that learning needs to continue, but it is their time to sort of set the agenda, I think.
Yes, and that's really hard. When I start talking about this, teachers automatically gravitate towards the idea of homework. And I'm like, I'm not talking about homework. I'm just talking about lifelong learning. And to build a mindset like that takes all kinds of conversations, of explanations, of modeling as a learner ourselves in front of our students, but talking about those opportunities. What did you learn yesterday? And, I feel like kids just so much associate just learning with school. It's almost like when you pick up your kid from school, what did you learn today? That's all they think learning happens in that one location. But, to help them build that mindset that they are open to learning new things wherever they go and whatever they do.
I think too a big piece is us as teachers also have to be vulnerable with our students and share with them that we all also are learning, and not just for the job too. Like, I mean, I think we should be vulnerable and say, hey, we're trying a new thing. I've never used Google Classroom or whatever the case may be. But I think it's also really powerful for them to see you as like truly a lifelong learner. We ask them to drink this Kool-Aid every day. And then like many of us don't speak about the fact that we just learned yesterday. We just did something. Hey, I YouTubed how to fix this and I fixed it and I felt pretty empowered and I was pretty excited about it, right? Like I think that's an important piece that we sometimes miss.
It is. It is not only talking about the things that we have already learned or that we learned outside of the classroom, but I just had a conversation in the online book study that I'm facilitating with a teacher who faces what a lot of teachers are afraid of. What if I don't know the answer? And especially when it comes to integrating the technology in their classroom, they feel like if a student calls them out and they don't know how to do something, that it's like they've been caught, like something's wrong. And so this teacher actually gave me the example and said, what if my student says, you're supposed to be the teacher, you're supposed to know this, blah 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 blah. And I was like, hang on, wait a second. Let's talk about this, So first of all, we'd be having a whole other conversation about respect in my classroom if a student was talking to me quite like that. But at the same time, that's when we talk about the fact that we as teachers are also learners, like you said, that we are learning together and that we live in a time of unprecedented change where we can't possibly be an expert in everything, especially technology. And so, hey, that's an opportunity. I don't know the answer. You don't know the answer. Let's figure this out together. Let's talk about how do we find solutions to our problems? How do we search Google? These are all applicable skills. And so those become teachable moments, not moments of fear that we've suddenly become inadequate, because that's just not true. That we can be experts in our content areas, but to think that in this day and age you can be an expert in anything, there's something new coming out, some new research, some new technology, that we just have to embrace the fact that things change and we have to adapt.
Yeah, simply put, I guess, I think true wisdom comes from the questions and the actions, not necessarily the answers.
Yes, absolutely.
So, all right, like, I could sit and talk to you like all day long. So, but I know there are other components to this framework. So that would the awesome dive into Beyond the Bell. What's another one we want to talk about here?
So the next one is beyond the grade level and subject area. And this is really all about pulling kids off of that conveyor belts of the factory model of education, based on the fact that you're in 7th grade, you're this age, you get to learn this, 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 and this, no more, no less, move on down the line. We want to open those doors so that students can have the freedom to explore the things that interest them, find their passions. Because to me, it breaks my heart to think of a senior graduating from high school who has no idea what they're truly interested in, because all they've ever done is play the game of school. And they don't exactly know, they never had those opportunities to explore their interests in their classroom. And that doesn't mean teaching something completely different, because I know some teachers are listening to this like, how in the world do I just begin to teach everything? No, it's about offering things like choice of topic, choice of reading materials, giving students those opportunities to explore those types of things. And there are many ways that we can integrate that into the things that we're already doing. But I feel like for a lot of our schools, the curriculum has become so tight that teachers feel like there's no wiggle room. It's this box that we're all like pinned into, and we really have to at least find a way to begin to open some of those little cardboard flaps on her box so that we can let some of the imagination take place and let students begin to stretch those creative legs and find other things that they may be interested in, because they may bring some amazing genius into what we're already teaching as well.
I like it. I'm thinking, like, hearing your story, I'm thinking about like that senior graduating and not really knowing about like their own sort of passion and drive, educationally speaking. And I'm thinking of that like classic lunch tray that have the little compartments, right? And if all we do is have them walk through and we just sort of serve them up the educational like food of my content, and then they go down the line a little bit and they get a scoop from you and then they get a scoop from the next person. And then like if you think of that classic lunch table or lunch tray, those they have those little like lips that like each compartment is totally separate of each other, and like that's devoid of any connection, right? And I think that's where I think our students see this dissonance from the real world. They get out there and they're like, well, I enjoyed my history class, but what am I supposed to do out here? Or I enjoyed, so and so's like computer class, but like What do I do out here? Because the reality is, like, even if you want to be a computer programmer, you need all the courses like that, just a solid liberal arts foundation. But we as an educational community have to do, I think, a better job of connecting how all these things bleed together. It's not just become a programmer or just become a history person or just become, right? Like, no. Like, all of these skills are needed, right? It blends together.
I like the lunch tray analogy there. That was really good. The other thing too, I have you ever facilitated a student panel discussion in front of
Yes.
teachers? So powerful. And a couple of summers ago, I facilitated a student panel. We had third grade through 12th grade, and several grades represented, most third through 12th grade. Now keep in mind it was in the summer, so the kids who were participating in something like this were either teachers' kids or high achievers who were
Right.
getting some kind of extra credit for it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So the little ones generally were some teachers' kids, but I ask all of those students, if you could learn anything you wanted to learn, but you still had to come to school every day, what would you want to learn? The little ones all wanted to learn how to draw. It became contagious, of course, once the first one said
That's
it,
right. Right.
So, and there, but they lit up, they were just excited. They wanted to talk about it. So by the time I worked my way up to the juniors and seniors, they couldn't answer the question without asking me more questions about what did it have to do with their GPA? Was it an AP course? I mean, it all came down to
Uh,
the factory, their game of school. That these kids play very well when they're high achievers like this, but at the same time, they're going to do what I did. They're going to pick a major based on whatever their parents or a counselor said was a good major, not because they knew they were actually interested in that topic. And so we really need to help students find those ways to explore that, I think.
I mean, hearing that story, like, it's like, yes, and it's so true that, like, I often talk in my work about, finding joy in the journey of life in our classrooms, that we as educators probably should spend a little more time going into the, like, kindergarten classroom and just watching, closing our mouths and just watching for the mastery of what that teacher is doing. I mean, we can all get distracted by the cute little kids and, and seeing them and, like, but I mean, watch the true mastery that's happening where they're embedding their passions, the students' passions, and, like, whatever sort of came to those kids that day, and still at the same time weaving in the standards and the things they need to get to, but at the same time letting it be student driven, letting it be playful, letting it truly be natural. And then what you describe in the upper grades is wholly unnatural, right? That is a system we've created that is no longer like animalistic learning, right? If we look at how animals learn, it is through play, it's through trial and error, right? It isn't through grades and GPA. Like, that is
Yeah.
just merely a function of the system. So, the more we can do to build in that sort of natural learning is where I think we're going to have a better shot of creating lifelong learners, because it's natural, it's innate.
Absolutely. I think too that there's a lot of different ways to explore this in your classroom. Like I mentioned, I think giving students more voice and choice in their learning is a natural way to sort of push those boundaries just a little bit. And there's a million different ways to do that. I'm a big fan of doing things like choice boards and learning menus, and also giving students choice of, research topics and reading and really helping to get to know them. But I think this ties back again to, like, what you're saying, that mindset. If we're building that mindset, we're having these discussions, we're finding out, hey, what do you really like right now? What are you interested in? If they can't answer that, that's a question that we can keep coming back to throughout the year. But so much of the more creative things that are out there now, even some of the more trendy things, tap into this very well, like Genius Hour. Obviously, that's a sort of a high level for me with the hitting the passion project idea. That's really what we want. But how many teachers come back to me who try Genius Hour and their kids can't choose a topic because they don't know what they're interested in?
Yeah.
So we've sort of got some foundational work to get to before we can build into those bigger projects, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing that these people, like, that these students, there's lots of them that when given the choice of, like, pure educational freedom on a period like Genius Hour, it's sort of overwhelming. And I have definitely read and heard a lot of people speak on the fact that sometimes the better thing to do might be to sort of limit the scope a little bit, but at the same time give plenty of sort of choice
Yeah.
and like, support them through that. But the other thing that you sort of touched upon there, I think, starts to go to kind of your next beyond, which is beyond the walls, right?
Yes. So Beyond the Walls is really about going global with dynamic learning, both bringing the outside world in and sharing the things that your students are doing and creating with a global audience as well. So I'll talk about the first side of sharing student work is really sort of a soapbox for me. It's a big mission of mine to get more teachers to share their work, the students' work, in some sort of online platform. And there's many different stages to that. But almost every time I do a keynote, I ask the question, how many of you have your students publishing their work for a global audience? And I get like maybe 5 hands that go up out of hundreds. And it just sort of comes back to me like, do you know how easy this is to do now? Like this is something that's at our fingertips that we're not taking advantage of. And the lesson that I learned as a teacher was many, many moons ago when I was teaching 8th grade pre-AP language arts. I was the techie teacher, so I oftentimes used tech for tech's sake just because I liked it. So full confession, like I said, didn't always do it the way I was supposed to. But I found this website that allowed my students to publish their writing and to get comments from the outside world. What? Oh my gosh. So anyway, interesting thing happened. As soon as they published and they saw that first comment, all the hands went up in class. Miss Bell, Miss Bell, Miss Bell. Can I revise mine? I didn't know anybody was going to read it besides you. Light bulb moment right there. So to think, yeah, I wish that I was their end all be all, but let's be honest. Right. They get used to us as an audience. They even get used to their own classmates that they see year after year. But to give them another audience suddenly gave more value to the quality of the work that they were creating. So for me, that was, and these were the pre-AP kids. These were already the teacher pleasers. And I was like, oh, you didn't give me your best work? Let's come back. Let's revise it. Let's make it our best work. And so that was really eye-opening for me that students will care much more about the quality of their work if they know somebody besides the teacher is going to look at it. And there's lots of ways to do this. And a lot of people may be watching like, Kasey, we can't do that. We can't publish names and faces. You don't have to publish names or faces, right? We can publish and give them an audience for whatever it is, whether it's writing or creating or projects or a YouTube video or whatever. We don't have to put their real name. We don't have to put,
Yep.
any
You're
personal information.
Yeah, you as the teacher are not going to be confused like, well, this person says it's Dan, but he doesn't. I mean, he looks like a student I have in class,
Yeah.
but their name's not Dan, so I guess I can't give this kid a grade. Like,
have them use a pen name, and especially with the little ones, yeah, you don't have to actually have their faces or anything. But let me tell you, if a high school football player can be on the front page of the newspaper, then maybe we should also be sharing what he's doing in class. I mean, there's things that I think about those seniors again when they graduate. They're going to be Googled, whether they're going to college or they're getting a job or wherever they're going. Somebody, hopefully, whoever's hiring them is at least smart enough to Google them. That's what I would do. And I want them to find something besides their Snapchats. I want them to find something that is positive. I want them to leave a positive digital footprint that shows how they grew throughout their career and what they learned.
Yeah, I think that's obviously really important. And I think this like idea of publishing for a global audience, like you said, doesn't have to be super difficult. Like I'm thinking if you teach, middle school students or high school students and you're an English teacher, like having kids read books, why don't you have them write an Amazon review like for the book and actually like post it on Amazon, like that would actually be something that's writing for a purpose, writing for an audience in service of something. I think that would be rather cool, and that would be just an easy example of like there is a real audience waiting.
Yeah,
and people would want to hear what people think, and actually, to be honest, for those young adult books, it would be so powerful that their voice. I mean, they could put in their thing like as a current 7th grade student. I really love, you know what I mean? Because like a bunch of teachers will go on and write Amazon reviews that are like, this is a great book for like young adults, but like how powerful if it's the actual young adult.
Right. Well, and think about the power of the authentic audience. Now, we can't always get the authentic audience depending on
Nope.
what we're doing, but I think back to, of course, I think as a writing teacher, but I used to have my students, okay, you're going to pretend that you're writing for this audience, right? You're going to write a persuasive essay convincing this group of NASA experts to take on your project.
Mm-hmm.
And it never failed. There would always be one student who would come up to me, but Miss Bell, aren't you the audience? Aren't you the one reading this? Like they couldn't wrap their head around it because I couldn't actually give it to them. But guess what? We could probably get a group of NASA experts to actually give feedback to our students. All we have to do is ask. We have authors and experts of all different types of, subject areas and different levels that we can bring into the classroom. And the amount of ways that we can share our learning is pretty much unlimited. So we just have to find ways to do it and to give students that opportunity.
Yeah, I taught writing for a couple of years as like an extra course. Like I had my history courses, and then we kind of were given a writing concept course. And what I did for a project, which was kind of speaks to this, is I wanted kids to do that sort of persuasive. It was that unit. And so I wrote Pepsi and said like, hey, having kids work on some stuff. Would you guys be willing to share a product that you are currently like thinking about doing advertising around? And our students will like build, like we're one of the companies that will pitch to you, right? And whatever that meant, and they shared, Pepsi's the owner of Quaker Oats, and they shared this like instant, like almost like a Keurig cup, but for oatmeal, right? Like it's all there and you just can put it in the microwave and like, psh, it's all done.
Yeah.
You don't have to add anything to it. And it was such a good, like authentic thing. And you could see the kids kind of light up because it was like, oh my gosh, like we're literally like doing this for PepsiCo. Like, and the product itself, no offense, to anybody out there, isn't the most like, we're not selling Lamborghinis here, right? But that's the reality of like, if you go into advertising, more often than not, the product is not the Lamborghini. It's not, Nike shoes. It's like oatmeal,
pencil,
toothpaste. But like the fact that there was that just teach of realism,
yeah,
that they like went gangbusters on it, and like their writing improved, their like creativity, their like drawings, eventually like pitches were just phenomenal. And we're talking about sixth graders here, because I wrote a few companies an email and got an actual product back, and like somebody from the company responded, and that was it actually. Like, I mean, we sent them stuff and they wrote back and said like, oh, we like these are really like nice, blah blah. But like that was it. There was no like Skype into the classroom. It wasn't super huge, but that's all it took.
Yeah, and I may start sharing this story that you just told me, by the way, too, as another example. I think that's fantastic. You just never know. All we have to do is ask. And the fact that people are so much more accessible now, different companies, and they like to give back to education. So, there's a very high likelihood that we can find the kind of audience that we're looking for. Of course, the other side of that I said, bringing the outside world in. When I asked teachers sort of that question again, how many of you have ever been in like a Google Hangout or a Skype, with someone else in your classroom? And I might get a few more hands than the first one, but it's still not widespread. And I think a lot of teachers don't realize how easy it is. I mean, you and I are connected via Skype. And there's a wonderful portal called Skype for Educators where teachers can find all kinds of organizations and resources and ways that they can connect to their classrooms. And it's something that's so accessible. I feel like just we've got to spread the news. It's just, one of those things they just don't know about. Like, guess what? Because this is my big selling point here. Guess how many yellow buses you had to ride?
Yeah,
to go on
0.
that field trip, right? 0. Guess how much fundraising you had to do? 0. This is right here at your fingertips, and almost everybody has some type of device that can do this in their classroom now. So it's too important of a learning experience to not bring in the outside world, because that's the way the rest of the world works, right? That's how we're able to do this summit right here, is because you're in Wisconsin, I'm in Texas, and you're probably talking to people all over the world, but that's the way the global economy works. Why are we not demonstrating that in our classrooms?
Yeah, I think that's super important. And also, I gotta give a plug. If we're gonna plug like Skype and some of the things we could do, guys, try, if you have not heard of it, mystery Skypes. They're so fun. It's playing 20 questions with another classroom across the world. It could even just be across town, but like that's the fun thing. The kids do not know where the other one is, so they have to formulate kind of the right questions so that they like eliminate. Like my kids at the first time we do it are like, are you in Wisconsin? And I'm like, that's not a great first question, because like either you're gonna hit like jackpot, they are, or they're not, and then like the rest of the world's still there. So think in big terms, big swaths.
Yeah.
Are you in North America, or are you east of the Mississippi? Stuff like that, so that like we can really like get rid of a bunch in one go. But super fun. Just the hashtag is mystery Skype. If you go on pretty much any social media and say like, hey guys, I'm looking, I'm a 5th grade classroom, I'm a 2nd grade classroom, wanting to do a mystery Skype, and you put it out to that hashtag, there will be people that will reply and say like, yeah, let's do this. That'd be great. So huge suggestion there that I think is great for all of us. All right. So we have Beyond the Walls, we have Beyond the Grade Level, and Beyond the Bell, but there is 2 more beyond. So I kind of want to like round this out. So
Yeah.
the next one is Beyond the Tools. So walk us through that a little bit.
So beyond the tools is really moving past that substitution level that so many teachers, I feel like, are still just about replacing paper in their classroom. And the conversations, even the vocabulary that we use is paper based. I get questions. How do I create a digital notebook? How do I create, a digital worksheet? Or God forbid, how do I put my worksheet in Google Classroom? I did a whole podcast on stop asking me how to put your worksheet in Google Classroom. Had a whole little soapbox moment. But at the same time, we have to really start thinking about what we can do that we couldn't do before. The things that technology allows us to do in new ways. So I feel like we need new vocabulary too. Instead of an interactive notebook, why aren't we having learning binges? Why aren't we talking about different ways that learning can help us? I think about also alternative ways to use traditional tools. And one of my favorites is Google Slides. You can use Google Slides to create a presentation. I do it all the time. But guess what? It does so much more. I mean, you can create almost anything in slides. You can create an ebook. You can do stop motion animation. You can create an infographic. You can have students collaborating. There's all of the 4 C's can happen in that besides the traditional presentation. And going back to that student panel that I mentioned earlier, so just to set the stage a little bit more, this is a school district that was not hurting for technology. They were 1-to-1 with iPads in elementary, 1-to-1 with MacBook Airs in middle school and high school. They had the goods. So my question for the student panel is, what are you doing with these very expensive devices? And I didn't say it that way, but that's what, I'm like, okay, so I've got these kids here. The school spent so much money doing this. What's the application? What's actually happening in the classroom? Every single one of those students from 3rd grade through 12th grade told me they made a presentation. And I tried to dig deeper to find out, are you creating something in, Keynote or PowerPoint or slides or whatever? Are you doing something different? Are they just calling it a presentation? No. And so to me, big moment here. One, we're not talking cross-curricularly enough and cross-grade levels to make sure that we're exposing kids to multiple types of learning and tools and different ways to demonstrate their learning. But 2, oh my gosh, a glorified presentation device. Anything can make a presentation, and you just spent millions and millions of dollars. So when we think about using these tools, we just have to think about pushing that boundary. And I have a continuum that I like to think of, from doing digital tools to do old things. I said doing, using digital tools to do old things, that substitute. And sometimes we do have appropriate moments to substitute, right? I wrote my book in a word processor. That was a substitution level, but there were other things that happened. We began to collaborate and edit and do some things that weren't previously possible besides, just putting it on paper. But at the same time, what are we doing to push that down towards the other end of using new tools to do new things? And I think sometimes some of the models that are out there, like SAMR and TPAC and things like that, are so deep and complicated that they can almost intimidate teachers. I've had a lot of conversations with teachers who feel like they are failures at SAMR because they're not reaching that highest level. And I think there's room for all the levels. We just have to be conscious of what we're doing and to kind of push those boundaries again, just pushing that next level.
I think my favorite part of Beyond the Tools is sort of the encouragement you're giving teachers to, definitely get over just the substitution. But then the other thing you sort of nuanced in there was to also look at digital tools, or any tool, really, to be honest, digital or not digital, in a different way. Like, just because the company handed you Google Slides and said, here, it's a presentation software, like, doesn't mean we have to take that product and just do that. I in some of my presentations, I talk about some of the like tools people can use to gamify a course. And, just because Kahoot hands it to you this way doesn't mean you can't add something to it. So I have kids do all sorts of things with Kahoot, and there are countless other examples that we could give where the probably the biggest impact on that classroom in terms of student engagement and student achievement. I'm again only talking about within inside the classroom. We can talk about other outside factors, but within inside the classroom, I would argue is your ability, you as the teacher, to create. So take these tools, but then like still be creative with them, And then you had mentioned in a previous section about how like our curriculum has become really tight and like sometimes handed to us. Then these tools become, like there isn't PD given around to them. So then we just get handed these tools. And then I think we lose a huge piece of creativity. And then that is where we, I think, start to begin the slide of what's unnatural in education, because now we have these little bite-sized curriculum bits. We use these tools for the exact thing the tool is used for. And then it's like, oh, where's the joy? Where's
Right.
the life? Where's the reality in any of that?
Well, and who's great at figuring out a new way to use a tool? A student. That's all you have to do. So if a teacher's watching this right now and thinking, Kasey, I can't think of all the different ways that it can be used other than what it was designed for, that's where that student choice comes in. And so when we begin to open the doors for students, sometimes even as simple as, hey, you know what, here's 3 tools from you that you could choose from, but if you have one you want to try, just come let me know and I'll approve, we'll talk about it and I can approve that. And sometimes students can show you something you've never heard of, you've never seen before. And, every time I sit down with a kid, I'm like, what are you playing on your phone? Like even my niece and nephew, I'm like, what is that? I've never seen, they just have their finger on the pulse of something. Adults, we just don't have time to do that anymore. But, just to bring that in, because when I give choice, even in workshops with teachers, I'm like, okay, using the digital tool of your choice, you're going to do this, this, and this to demonstrate your learning. And a lot of times I'll see teachers and I'll think, oh, they're going to regret that choice. I'm like secretly like thinking, oh, I don't know that one's going to work, but I've got to stay back to let them figure it out. And then they come up with something I would have never thought of. And so we can't let our own limitations be limitations for our students, because that creative thing that we're always talking about and trying to tap into can happen when there are limitations that we never even realized, and that there are opportunities that we haven't even taken advantage of.
I think that leads really nicely into your last piece here, the beyond the due date. And I think people get why it's a good lead in here once you kind of define what that means.
Yeah, so this one sounds scary, I think, to teachers. They're like, what are you talking about? I gotta get my grades in the grade book. I can't just keep giving them time. That's not what this is about. This is coming from my experience as a teacher. I don't know about you, but occasionally I had some sparks in students where maybe they were working on a project and the student would come in every morning to tell me everything they were working on. They were so excited. Oh, Miss Bell, Miss Bell, Miss Bell, I did this, 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 and this. Oh, and then I'm going to do this. And they're just so excited. They're so into it. And you have that proud teacher moment like, oh, I finally found something that's going to engage my students. And, it comes time to turn it in. Oh, Miss Bell, can I please just have one more day? Just one more day because I still want to do this, this, and that. And you knew good and well that kid had done everything that was required. But unfortunately, especially if it wasn't in a digital format, you got to turn it in because I got to get the grade in the grade book. I'll give it back to you as soon as I can. It doesn't really matter. As soon as they turn that over, they are stifled. They've lost that momentum. They've lost that spark. And so I want us to take advantage of that. That's a missed opportunity for students. If we have the opportunity to see a spark where a kid is really interested in whatever topic or idea or whatever they're exploring in our classrooms, we want to take on more of that mentor coach role and just let them continue and encourage them to continue. Hey, you know what? What if you go do this? Or what if you actually contact this expert and let them look at your work? And then let's come back and, come tell me about that. Or here's a book to read on the topic that you were really interested in, or this other author that you're interested in. It's not about teaching something else. It's just about encouraging students to continue to explore the things that they're interested in. Again, sort of tying back to everything we've already talked about, that lifelong learning mindset and getting them out of that box.
Yeah, I love this idea of the mentor role. You know, our job is not just to merely to create a bunch of assignments and walk them through, right? It is truly like a mentor-mentee relationship would be the ideal, I should say. Like, right? And I understand that we're there's time constraints and there's just resources constraints in terms of like there's one of us and like there might be 20, 30, 150 of them, but if we at least take this mentor mindset, I think that would change so many things about the classroom and about learning. And like you said, as we've previously mentioned, like it would become so much more natural, the learning, that I think it would kind of unlock some of the potential, and I think we don't want to lose sight of that.
And that's how I prefer to look at things too, is I really want to put a positive spin on it. I don't want to talk about and say, oh, you're doing this wrong. It's just, here's an opportunity to do something different. And sometimes these are missed opportunities or ways that we can change and shake things up, right? That's what I'm all about. That's my mission. That's my goal. And if I ruffled some feathers along the way, good, because that's what I want to do. And if I've made anybody uncomfortable today, good, because that's what I want to do. I want to get people out of their comfort zone to try some of these things.
Well, I think you definitely have shaken up the beehive here. I'm sure there's people going to be all abuzz as they're learning today and tweeting out today what they've learned. Again, just a huge thanks to you, Kasey, for being here and sharing your talent and time with us in the Hive.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me the time to share my passions.
I loved your sort of enthusiasm. You could just tell.
My hands are flying.
Yes. You can just tell that you're excited about it. And I think that makes all of us excited. Something else that we shouldn't lose sight of in our classroom is to bring that excitement and joy and enthusiasm. So I've really enjoyed this session. I know lots of others are going to as well. Thank you everyone who has tuned into this session as dedicated educators who are committed to bringing the best to this school year. Let's make sure to be mindful, be awesome, and be in motion by applying these ideas. Take care, guys.